Can you hear me all right? Is mic on? So my name is Nate. I am a philosopher, an esotericist, and a spiritual teacher. The title of my talk is, how do I go back? How I found the Dharma to be true. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to explore that rather than doing it in an abstract way by way of a personal narrative. So what is truth? This is perhaps the quintessential philosophical question. Wait, why is it doing that? Wow. Wow.
It's better for you to look over there so your face remains.
Right.
And that's the truth.
Just sit down.
Wait, we're going all the way to the ocean again. Get me out. Mike, save me.
Thank you. So, what is truth? This is perhaps the quintessential philosophical question. For me, this question was never merely academic. I was born into contradiction, and I went looking for reality. My grandfather was a gangster. He worked for Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel, both of whom were infamous, one of whom inspired a character in The Godfather. My grandfather was a wiretapper, spying on rival syndicates. He quit working for the mafia after he was converted at a revival by none other than the Reverend Billy Graham, the most prominent evangelist of the 20th century. Together, they formed an organization called Youth Development Incorporated, dedicated to helping at-risk youth. Unfortunately, the mission statement of that organization never reached their own family. My mother lived in poverty. She was a deeply troubled woman with a long history of untreated mental illness. She served time in Rikers for committing arson, and shortly after she was released from prison, she was assaulted, and because of her inflexibly dogmatic evangelical fundamentalism, she chose to raise the child that resulted. Because of her instability, she was rarely able to secure food. We were always being evicted, and we lived in a state of constant chaos and frequent violence. The only thing keeping us from total collapse at any given time was my mother's church, which kept bailing her out of trouble because she was an extremely devoted volunteer. The only other thing in the situation that actually worked to my advantage was that she kept trying to put herself through college, even though she wasn't cognitively able to keep up and kept failing a lot of classes. She kept trying to do a triple major in art and English and philosophy. And because she was basically never able to afford a babysitter, this meant that I got taken along for the ride in various bouts throughout elementary school. Although I was only intermittently engaged in what was being said, I was deeply struck by questions about reality and how it is possible to know reality. So throughout childhood, I tried in various ways to disconfirm Descartes' hypothesis that we are in a dream, trapped in the illusion of a malicious deceiver. This blended together with my experience at church, where during the frequent, lengthy prayer meetings, I would try to hear the voice of Jesus and feel the Holy Spirit, and so much so that it became a kind of analytical meditation, where I invariably found that anything that presented as Jesus or the Holy Spirit actually arose from a prior moment of my own cognition. So I was in a state of constant, wary perplexity. My grandparents, who never did anything to help, thought my mother's church was a cult. Our church thought the entire world was fallen, sinful, doomed, and spiritually dangerous. The kids at school thought our church was crazy, etc. And this led me to wonder what was going on. I wanted to understand how it was possible for so many people in the same space to be projecting such a different world. So by the time I was around 14, this inspired me to begin a careful, independent study of the history of Western philosophy and cross-cultural esoteric mysticism. I didn't like I didn't like the world that I was in, and I wanted to change it. In order to do that, the thing I found myself doing was helping other people. I was so impressed by certain basic spiritual truths that at school, I convinced anyone who was willing to listen to read some of the same books and spend time after school talking about them. Flash forward. By 23, my main philosophy professor would complain that everything I had to say was ultimately too mystical. My first meditation teacher complained that everything I had to say, on the other hand, was too rational. It was during this period, fortunately, that I met my wife, a powerful intellectual and metaphysician who would go on to become an accomplished meditator. She had been severely neglected and abused by her own family, and so we shared a certain set of philosophical intuitions. Principally, that meant concern with what you could call the problem of presupposition. Every theory, is intelligible only relative to a background theory. Even scientific materialism effectively presupposes the existence of the external world. Appearance can chart the dynamics of, experiment can chart the dynamics of appearance, but it cannot state whether or to what extent appearance corresponds to actuality. It seems clear to us that the great contemplative traditions were all expressing aspects of the truth. However, it was also clear that there was no obvious place to draw a line between which aspects of a teaching are true and which are the accumulation of cultural embellishment. Over time, we became increasingly focused on Buddhism in particular because, in epistemic terms, it has the greatest pragmatic and predictive efficacy. At the same time, we always maintained a certain measure of skeptical distance, what Husserl calls bracketing, epistemic abeyance, holding ultimate questions in suspension. The turning point came when we were on retreat. We were following the instructions of Buddhaghosa's Visuddhimagga and Daniel Ingram's Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. It was at this point that I had a dream where a monk appeared to me and, wow. Oh, gosh, yeah, that makes so much sense. So I had a dream where a monk appeared to me and said, "You need to get your Geshe degree." I said, "I'm not going to do that because if you don't know, that involves moving to India for 20 years or more and living as a fully ordained monastic." He said, "That's okay. You don't understand. There is someone who has condensed the canon that you need to study. In the morning, I am urging you to remember this and look." Although this struck me as preposterous and improbable, I did spend quite a while the following day looking. Eventually, it led to Hector's teacher, Geshe Michael Roach, to the ACI curriculum, and ultimately here. So what I'm saying is this dream, this mystical experience, managed to refocus the direction of my life. I focused on Tibetan Buddhism, in fact, an unusually devout Tibetan Buddhist, after I spent years poring over those courses. But where does that leave us philosophically? In a way, this only underscores the point that we are, in Sartre's terms, condemned to be free. In a manner of speaking, there remains an element of underdetermination. The space of possible explanations is not exhaustively constrained by the available data. Perhaps the dream was exactly what it appeared to be. Or perhaps it was merely a fortunate coincidence. A reductive materialist, after all, would say that it is a statistically aberrant epiphenomena born of a mind obsessed with religion. On one level, I aspire to hold that tension rather than collapsing it. On another, more personal level, it feels to me like a fundamental confirmation that there is good in the universe, that the lineage is not merely a contingent, culturally conditioned historical construct, but rather that it is a living current of initiation connecting everyone who practices the teachings. The tradition advises us to analyze. So, as to what is true, we need to investigate, hold the mystery, keep the method, and let the truth reveal itself.